So this week, we're talking about the Farm Bill, which is, I know right now, the 2024 Farm Bill is essentially last year's Farm Bill that's been extended, right? But that could all change soon if what was released last week moves forward, correct?
Correct, yeah. Last year was a one-year extension. It's a 5-year bill normally. And so agreement couldn't be made in time to beat the deadline last year. Actually, we were past the deadline, but it was into the winter season a bit. Anyway,
Yeah.
so we hope to be successful here with another 5-year one and have stability and predictability for farmers, for those that would finance them. The banking industry likes they like stability, as well as the other aspects of the program, so they have continuity.
What are some of the big changes from last year's Farm Bill or the last 5-year Farm Bill to what's on the table right now?
Well, we've worked pretty hard on foreign promotion under what's known as MAP is one of them, and then the expanding the crop insurance, because as you know, the folks in the walnut industry really took a hard hit a couple of years ago, as well as almonds as well. So we want to have a broader availability of crop insurance, so there isn't the need for disaster funds that are out on an ad hoc basis, and the farmers will be paying into their own crop insurance. So it really, sets the floor instead of having just a complete disaster, because it was really, as you know, really devastating for the walnut folks a couple of years ago, and almonds have had a rough time too.
Okay, so crop insurance is obviously something that would impact growers here in our area. How would having better or more extensive crop insurance, would that benefit those of us who maybe we don't grow but we buy local produce?
It helps to have a stable community of agriculture all across the board, all the different crops. California is extremely blessed in what we can grow. We have so many specialty crops that somewhere between 90 and 99% of them are grown in this state that America consumes. And so having that steady reliability does help the consumer, because we won't have to have a wipeout one year and then have to start relying on a foreign source for almonds, pistachios, walnuts, rice, any of it, So it's got to be domestically grown so that customers will have the quality they expect, a price that they more or less expect. I can't do anything about inflation right now, but that reliability comes from an American-grown crop.
So I also saw something in there, speaking of foreign grown crops, there's something about keeping an eye on farmland that's being bought up by other countries, specifically China. Is that something you're concerned about? And
it's a great
concern.
What are we
thinking?
And a lot of people are very concerned about that. Instead of them owning so much of our strategic properties, which agriculture is, as well as mines and the areas that are next to, a lot of times, Air Force bases and military bases, that they seem to be focusing on that. So I don't think they're really there to farm it, so to speak, And so it's important. There's different pieces of legislation that are moving along at a state level. Haven't had much luck in the discussion at the federal level so far. And some might say, was there a constitutional issue of not allowing people to own certain types of land? Well, when it's a national security issue and you have your basically known adversary, China, trying to undercut us at every turn on our currency, on foreign affairs, on what are they going to do in Taiwan and the South China Sea, and how that affects Japan, all that. We need to have stability of who owns what. They own some of the major packing plants for pork, and I think they're moving into cattle. So it's just we need to have a limitation on that, and because that'll be to our best interest long term.
Okay. I saw something in this new draft that has to do with maybe some sort of incentives for reducing energy use. Can I ask you about that, as well as, is there anything to do with regenerative agriculture, incentivizing that?
These are terminologies, regenerative agriculture. I mean, we've been farming the same land in my family since 1931, and some of my cousins since like 1914. And folks up in Siskiyou County and East Shasta County and Tehama and all those areas that have been ranching for 5 and 6 generations, it regenerates because of good practices that they already do. So what they're talking about is tying up carbon in the soil. And I remind folks, carbon dioxide is only 0.04% of the atmosphere. And all these headstands we're doing to try and eliminate carbon is going to be to our detriment, because China, India, those other areas are going to keep doing what they do, and only the U.S. and the Western countries are going to be the ones playing this carbon game. So, and there's an element of that trying to be forced in by USDA, but we're trying to make sure the Farm Bill doesn't have this forced carbon business in it. So,
Well, what about
so
soil
agriculture
health?
does well when people take care of the land, when they're good stewards of the land. There's incentives in conservation, and so the bill has conservation elements in here
Okay.
to help conserve the soil.
That's what I was going to ask you
And
about.
it helps with the wildlife, but we don't need to go whole hog into this whole carbon
Uh-huh.
ranching deal. There's people trying to pay them to sequester carbon and even lay out their land or change crops. Now, people grow the crops that grow best on their land. We have so much rice in the area that is because it grows best in that heavy soil. The orchards grow well on the little sandier soil along the rivers like that. You wouldn't want to put rice there. And so farmers, being an economic market that they're in, that it's such a competitive market, the price, the ability to make a profit is so, I guess, right there on the edge that they know the market better than anybody. So somebody trying to say, we think you should change crops and grow something else that ties up carbon or that doesn't use as much water, well, it's not really realistic. Farmers know best what to grow on their land, and there's always ways to refine and do better. In the rice industry, for example, we're precision leveling the land and been doing it for the last about 40 years. But it's using GPS guidance, and it helps us to use less water, have to use less chemical treatments and all that. And drip irrigation is working tremendously well in
Yeah.
orchards and others. So technology will advance forward. We don't really need someone dictating to us to do that.
What are your thoughts about something like cover crops, where it's the same crop that's growing to be sold on an orchard, for example, but putting some other sort of, gosh, to me it looks like weeds, right? But just something to better enrich the soil, just for, like you said, soil health.
There's good to have incentives to do that, but it still has to be within the plan of what the farmer would do. And so when they're talking about taking crops down in the Central Valley because they've taken their water away and putting massive solar panel farms, which is an
Yeah.
insulting term, or saying, well, let's plant cover crops instead. Well, they'll still use water. Does the cover crop have a market? Does it have a need, or is it just there to keep the dust down?
Yeah.
So we have plenty of water, and that ends up being a water fight. We have plenty of water if we would just capture it, Shasta and Orville, thankfully filled this year, but San Luis Reservoir is down 500,000 acre-feet because they interpreted a fish population in a way that didn't allow them to pump that full. So that means 500,000 acre-feet is not available to the Central Valley.
You mentioned these solar farms, and I've seen a little bit about them. Is that something that's mentioned in this farm bill at all? Are there restrictions on solar farms or any support?
That's not an
of them?
appropriate area for the Farm Bill to try
Okay.
and cover, and it probably would make it not pass too.
Yeah.
That has to be a different battle.
Okay.
What the Farm Bill incentivizes more is fiber optic and having much more connectivity that way through the communications we need to have and have them reach farther into rural areas.
Oh.
So that's been the last couple farm bills.
So explain that to me. What does one have to do with the other?
It's part of the rural development program that the Farm Bill is. It's got a lot of aspects, of
Yeah.
course. So rural development is a piece that helps small towns with being able to get financing for things they need. It's not so much part of the Farm Bill, but as you have that infrastructure in small towns, that's important for the marketing, for communications, and for the local hospitals. And it's been a pretty
Yeah.
big thing to have that expand more and more. So telehealth, telemedicine is very important to get to the small hospitals we have up this direction. They can take images and send them off to the lab somewhere in the urban areas where they have those resources, and they can diagnose people there and decide, is it something that is urgent that we need to ship somebody from a small hospital that doesn't have all that to in those areas. So that's an aspect of it that is important in the Farm Bill too. Rural
Okay.
development, I mean, it's helped, for example, finance or fire engine for one of our places up in Plumas County in the past. So the rural development is and it's not a giant part of the Farm Bill. The SNAP program, as we
Yeah.
know it, is about 82% of the spending of the Farm Bill.
Really?
Yes.
And a little bit less in this farm bill than the last version.
There's really been not much change made to it at all. We just always seek to make refinements so that the folks that are truly the needy ones are going to be the ones that are receiving the SNAP benefit, and that it's attached to a realistic need and a quantifiable amount of actual benefit to the families. It's not, of course, the minute you say anything about that, say, oh, you're trying to cut it out and cut families off, and all the hype starts happening again. That's not the case at all. It's been a pretty successful program, but it's also up to us to have oversight on that and make sure it's focused on the right folks at the right rate. So it's, during the COVID era, now the Biden administration threw a lot of extra into it that put it artificially high. They had to come back to pre-COVID levels.
Is this like through the Inflation Reduction Act and how that played into it, or different?
No, that was kind of after.
Okay.
It was part of the bigger package that was done just after that when the Democrats were in power. Inflation Reduction Act did a lot of other things, which the title of that didn't do anything to help reduce inflation, because when you spend money you don't have, that doesn't help cut inflation. Government already being in the marketplace devouring so much of the available money does not help reduce inflation. And so the focus needs to be on letting business produce things that people want. And agriculture in this country, or manufacturing in this country, mining in this country, all that sort of thing.
Yeah. Last question for you on this topic. We didn't really talk about forest management. How does that play into the Farm Bill?
Yes, we've had good success in previous two farm bills with getting more elements of forest management, because you might ask, why is forest management in there? Because U.S. Forest Service is under the guise of the USDA. And so we have direct oversight of both of those. And so I've been fortunate to be chair of the subcommittee on forestry, and that's a big deal to us in our backyard here. We've been driven, of course, by the horrendous fires that have affected us so badly with Camp Fire and the loss of life and disaster in Paradise. A 1 million acre loss in the Dixie Fire up there, affecting so much of Plumas and other counties and such. It's just, so I'm very motivated to try and get things reformed in the way forestry is done. And that really is prodding the U.S. Forest Service at the high level. This isn't the local folks. It's D.C. being more motivated to really be aggressive. We need to have, one aspect of the bill we're working on is being able to trim around power lines a wider perimeter, a wider distance, because several of these fires have been caused by interaction with power lines and trees.
Yeah.
So, and the other foliage there. And we wouldn't have had the Dixie Fire be near what it was. We wouldn't have had the Camp Fire be what it was. And so there's a lot of factors there, but part of it is the forest management. And Forest Service is treating a tiny percentage. They have 193 million acres under their purview. And the amount that's being treated, is the term, is not nearly enough to keep up. The trees are growing more board feet of trees, of fiber, by far than what we're harvesting each year. So you can see that that's a losing proposition.
Yeah.
And so for those, again, worried about it, like, it doesn't mean we're going to cut every tree from here to Oregon or from here to Missouri. It means we're going to try and keep an inventory that's commensurate with what the land will sustain.
Okay.
If you want sustainability, 500 trees per acre is not sustainable, because you're going to, if you have a drought period, and they happen, the trees are going to struggle for less water. They become vulnerable. Insects attack them and kill them off.
Yeah.
So we have to have the right amount of trees per acre that are sustainable for the water supply, and for the trees being healthy amongst each other, getting the light they need. And it's better for the wildlife, because the wildlife, owls can't fly between the trees to do their hunting and such.
And to be clear, this draft bill would support better, in your opinion, better forest management, more forest management.
It has several aspects and some amendments where we might be working on this week when we go to committee on it as well. So we're always looking for different angles, like something quickly called the categorical exclusion, allowing us to do 10,000 acre projects without having endless NEPA regulations and NEPA permits. It just take forever. This isn't really new. Nothing's new under the sun. We know what we need to do. Stay out of the streams, stay out of some of the old growth. If there's particular habitat, you work around that. But by and large, you can go out and do the work, thin trees, take the dead stuff, take the brush, and you do need to get some marketable trees out there, because there isn't enough money in the U.S. Treasury to go out and do this just on the basis of that, without having a marketplace aspect to it.
Okay, so that's something that you'll be bringing up as you meet in committee this upcoming week.
Yeah, we have several amendments. We've already got some of those elements put in the bill through the previous work, and then a couple more amendments on the things that didn't make it in the final language. So there's a lot of good aspects. One of them is helping save the sequoias. Kevin McCarthy started that bill down in that area, in the central eastern part of the state. So
Yeah.
we have to do more work on things like that too.
Okay.